Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode on Fit as a Fiddle. Our guest today is Jesse Barnett. He's a New York City-based dancer, Pilates instructor, and personal trainer. And Jesse also has a certified strength and conditioning specialist certification, which is CSCS. And so we are really excited to have you on the show today, Jesse, to talk about dancers and injuries and injury prevention and how to make sure that our bodies stay strong. So welcome onto the show.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So firstly, let's just dive into your background and kind of what brought you into the space and into the work that you do today.
So I came to New York City in 2013 when I started my BFA in dance at Marymount Manhattan College. So I did my 4 years there and got my dance degree. And then as I was finishing, I had to kind of start thinking about what the immediate future would look like. And like most dancers, thinking, what's my side hustle going to be? Because let's be real, dance might not be paying my bills actually. So through my mentor at Marymount, she remembered that when I first applied to school, I was actually going in for the BA in Body Science and Motion, which is this different sub degree track that they offer. And I was actually originally going to get all like my PT prereqs and go down that route. I didn't think I was really interested in the performance track so much. Got into the BFA, that changed, yada yada. And then we get around to senior year, and she goes, "You like bodies, right?" I was like, yeah, absolutely. Anatomy, physio. I just don't have time for it. She's like, "I get it." And she basically said, there's this Pilates program in New York called the Kane School. It's where she went. She supported herself through it. And she just said, like, you're going to go here. You're going to get this certification. That's going to pay your bills. And then you can go audition and like dance and do what you want. I didn't ask any questions. I literally just, before I had actually graduated, started the what they call core muscle anatomy course, which is the first part of that cert. And then went through the certification. And my sort of, really like love and obsession, which is what now most of my life is, which is fitness and training and all that, sort of came after I started it. Yeah, initially this was like my way to pay my bills, and then became sort of evangelical about it and got deeper into the life after that. So I did the Kane School cert, which is this really great Pilates program in New York at a studio called Connected, founded by this amazing woman, Kelly Kane. It's a very unique Pilates program in that it is more focused on mechanics and anatomy more than most Pilates programs. The Pilates part is half of it. And then you get this really great education in anatomy and biomechanics, special populations. You get to dip your toe into some touch techniques through some of the awesome clinicians that work in that space. There are also some great physical therapists there that we get to learn from a little bit. So I went through that program, and that became kind of my day job, right? Was doing the Pilates. Then I came to this space where I am now, Physical Equilibrium in New York, where you have training, Pilates, physical therapist, this kind of one-stop shop for all of your physical needs. That then gets me kind of into the training life. I start working with the trainers here, getting to know them, learning from them. I start really understanding the importance of lifting and load in addition to these more kind of somatic practices like Pilates. And eventually, my two mentors here, who are the owners of the gym, Sarah Dimmick and Sarah Curry, were like, just get a training certification. Like, you're doing it, you're lifting, you like it, you get it, just do it. So they pushed me to get the CSCS through NSCA, which was an awesome decision. And now I'm doing both. I've got clients that are just training clients. I have those that are just Pilates. I'm usually bullying one into the other. Like my Pilates people, I'm like, what you really need to do is deadlift. And then my training clients, I'm like, what you really need is to get on a reformer. Because ultimately, I think that's how it works best, is when you sort of get a little bit of everything, which I'm sure we're gonna get into, because dancers certainly need that. And that's sort of where I'm at right now. My day-to-day is the training life, whether it's lifting, Pilates, some mix of, right now, I'm really into kettlebells. I'm finally going to make that a more regular part of my life. Cross your fingers, I passed the snatch test in February, which, if I guess
Woo!
if anyone doesn't know what that is 100 snatches with a 24 kg bell in 5 minutes. I'm dreading it. But hopefully that's going to be okay. And that's where we're at right now. And I'm
That's
loving
incredible.
it.
Wow. No, that's amazing. I love that training and, this kind of like fitness anatomy and biomechanics path was actually a passion that came thereafter. That I have a very kind of like similar-ish story in the sense that I'm also a dancer and that's what I wanted to do. My mom is a dance teacher, and I remember graduating high school. I had just finished this like huge dance performance that I had just done a solo for like different Indian classical styles. We had raised money for a hospital in India, and I was just like on the high of dancing. And I was like, Mom, I'm just gonna like, go to India for a year and just dance for a year, and then I'll do college after that. She's like, no, no, no. Just go to college, finish your degree, and then you can go dancing. And then as I was progressing through my college years, I danced a lot at like through NYU on a dance team and through dance classes. And then at some point I just got obsessed with science and anatomy and biomechanics, and I'm really, really interested in everything related to physical therapy. And at that point, I just wanted to go straight into PT school from undergrad. And my mom was like, wait, you said you were going to go dance. Like, we were going to support you to go dance for a year. I'm like, I don't want to dance for a year. I actually want to go be a PT now.
You're like, it's actually less stressful.
It was definitely not less stressful. but but it's just funny because we, as dancers, I think just as movers, I think learning about the body and how we move in the first place, it's just so fascinating. And sometimes, like, even treating so many people on and off Broadway and performers in New York City, people will come to me that's like ripped, have like six-pack abs, like really strong people. And they're coming to the clinic for a reason. Of course, I wouldn't be seeing them if they're in, have nothing going on. But, we'll start talking about like some basic physiology and like basic things related to the human body and like ways that we should be thinking about stretching differently, for example. And they'll be like, wow, like we didn't talk about this in dance class. And I'm like, I know, we didn't in my dance classes either. Our warm-ups sucked, like full blown sucked. And like now I like go to my mom, like, Mom, we cannot do those same workouts anymore. We have to do warm-ups very differently. I'm sure you can resonate with all of that.
Oh, 100%. So I barely knew, I think, what a glute was when I was in college. So one thing that I guess it's maybe important for people to understand about most dance programs, whether it's a pure conservatory or what I was in, which was a full 4-year degree track, but what you'd call a conservatory style program, which means y'all are going to dance all day long, but we're still going to make you do gen eds, And you're dancing all the time, and it's probably the most you're ever going to dance like your entire life. Even if you do go on to have like a career with a company, the amount of hours you're going to put in are absolutely insane. Right? There are days when I would have like 3 technique classes, so that's like 90 minutes a piece. Then I have maybe 1-2 rehearsals in the evening, which could range from an hour and a half to 3 hours a piece. And then if it's a certain point in the semester, then you have performances, so you go do bar, which is like ballet warm up. So it's like taking another ballet class and then performing. And then everyone's like, why is my body so messed up? I don't understand why I'm breaking. Well, it's because you're doing too much, first of all. And you're not given that education, first of all, what's happening in your body in the first place. And the information you do get about your body and the way it works is something that, am I allowed to swear? What's the rule here?
Minimally.
No is an acceptable. Okay. So I'm going to call it, you get a lot of dancer anatomy BS.
Perfect.
Which is this view of the body that, in my experience, dancers have developed over time that it's like almost on the right track, but it really goes off the rails in some really fundamental ways. And one is just in basic functions. So an example of this, of the dancer BS science is, let's say you're going to do a développé, which is a movement where you take your leg and let's say you're going to just lift it to the front as high as you can, like towards your head, right? That's a développé. And you get this weird cue all the time to like développé from underneath the leg. And they're kind of referencing what, your kind of glute hamstring, that kind of posterior chain of the leg. Here's the thing. Those muscles, glute hamstring, do not produce that movement. They just don't. I was in a ballet class one time. This was only a few years ago, so I'm not in school, and it's this instructor who's very well respected and has quite a following. And I'm doing this kind of développé action. I hadn't done ballet in a while, and just like my hip flexors cramping a bit. And she sees me dropping my leg a little, and I'm like, this is not a big deal. She decides she's going to stop class and walk over to me and be like, let's take a look at this. And at this point, I'm in my career enough to know what this is and that this woman needs to just not. But she starts poking around my hip, and she feels my psoas sort of contracted, and she goes, well, you just need to turn that off. And I had to shut my mouth. Right, exactly. Yes. For everybody listening at home, she just made a face. It was the correct face to make. So she's telling me to shut my hip flexor off in a position that is straight up hip flexion. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And I have to just kind of keep my mouth shut because I can't say in the middle of class, no, ma'am, you're wrong. I'll get tossed out. Right. And so this is an example of the type of movement education that dancers get a lot. We just get this really weird backwards information. Now, in her defense, what happens with a lot of these cues is there's sort of like this energetic idea that I understand what they mean. The problem is those energetic ideas do not equate to what is physiologically happening in the body, and that's a problem when they get treated like they're the same thing. When someone tells you to use your quad to do X, but that's not what your quad does, that's a problem. When they tell you to use your glute to do XYZ, but that's not what your glute is supposed to do, that's an issue, right? Because the brain is partially a task-oriented thing. Your brain doesn't ultimately care how you do a task. It kind of just wants to get the job done. It's okay with shortcuts, right? So this is something that really comes up a lot in Pilates and lifting, where your form and the shape you make is one thing. Understanding how your body's supposed to produce that movement is another thing. Your squat can look beautiful, and that's great. It doesn't actually mean the right muscles are firing in the right way. So the way to do that is you have to understand what the right muscles are. What we're doing with our clients all the time is not just showing them how to do a squat, but saying, this is your glute. These are your quads. These are your hamstrings. And these are how you use them. Sarah Curry here in the gym, I know you've spoken with, tells her clients all the time, put your brain in your butt when you squat,
I
which
love
I
that.
love. And that's her way of describing this brain-body connection. So not only is the squat happening correctly, but you understand this is the muscle I'm supposed to use in the right moment. Dancers don't get that. So we wind up with our beautiful shapes and an emphasis on beautiful shapes, but there's a lack of function, which then down the road leads to dysfunction, right? The right muscles then not developing, bony structures not getting the support that they need, right? And then you get just all the overuse injuries, over time. You get the lack of training, you have lack of strength. And then if you're just repeating all the same stuff over and over and over and over again, kicking your leg up a gazillion times, like eventually something's going to get really pissed off, So, I would say that's the biggest issue that I see in the dance world is just straight up lack of knowledge. So people don't even know what type of training to seek out in the first place, and it took me a long time to find that for myself. And I certainly did not get it in school. I mean, it's really wild when you think about it.
Absolutely. I resonate with so much of what you just said, Jesse. And just for listeners, we have two other people who are from Physical Equilibrium, both the Sarahs, Dimmick and Curry, who have been on the show today. So that's who Jesse's referring to. So I'll link those on the show notes as well, because they have some really great things and kind of refer to some of these concepts as well. But today we're kind of focusing specifically on dancers because, you can hear a conversation. We're supposed to be bionic with our bodies and be able to do all these really cool things and make all these great shapes, like you just mentioned. But there's just a really kind of like an idealistic education behind it, but not really like understanding what's really happening with your body. And so one of the things that my mother is my dance teacher. So we have a lot of things to say to each other about this. Now that I'm a physical therapist and have had training and actually understand a lot of this stuff and treat so many people with dance injuries. And so one of the things is she'll just say like, oh, you'll just get better the more you practice this routine. And I'm like, no, mom, you have to cross train this routine. The more you practice this routine, which is, by the way, asymmetrical in some extent. So like, for example, these developes or these, whatever, run a job, whatever you're doing, that's, one-sided sometimes, you are overusing one side of your body over the other. And so a lot of the times, like even dancers that I treat for like injuries who are on stage right now, I'm like, I can't tell them just do the motion on the other side. Like I can tell one of my postpartum patients, like, okay, your right wrist is hurting. Just hold your baby with your left arm for the next week. Don't worry, you won't drop your baby. We can modify this motion. You cannot modify the routine. I guarantee you that's not going to be an option.
You're going to get fired.
Exactly. You're going to get fired. So the other option is let's do enough motion outside of class and outside of, being in practice to strengthen other muscle groups and cross train. And for a lot of dancers, I mean, this is a very big generalization. So this is not everyone, but the generalization is that there is some level of, intention to be more flexible a lot of the times, not in every dance form, but in Western dance forms, sometimes there's an emphasis on flexibility when we need to be focusing on flexibility, balance, strength, coordination, endurance. There are so many
Stability.
Stability, exactly. So there's so many things that we need to work on. So I'd love for you to chime in on all of those aspects. And how do you work with your patients on those, from a day-to-day perspective, and how do you educate them so that they understand the importance of it?
Yeah, you hit on some really awesome stuff. The single-sidedness is a really interesting point, and it's very unique to dance. You're right. Choreography is not even. This is what I tell. I sadly don't really have, any professional dancers that are clients. That's because there's a whole other issue with like they can't afford me, which is a problem. Is like dancers just they often don't have access to these things, or like for my friends who I'm like just like coming to the gym, whatever, they don't have time for it. But what I do tell them when I talk to them is like your choreography is not even. Your choreography is not made to be good for you. It's not. It's made to look a certain way. It's made to convey whatever it is the choreographer is trying to convey at a given time. It is not made for you and your body. In fact, oftentimes what you're dancing was maybe even made on someone else's body that was more built for it, right? And so I would say if I were to put all of those things together that you just mentioned, the stability, the strength, the more active mobility, ultimately what the dancer needs to build is resilience, because you can't change the choreography, and the choreography does not care how it feels when you do it, right? What you need is that resiliency, and that's what various types of cross training, but particularly loaded, right? You need resistance to build that muscle around your bony structures. It's going to give you resiliency. So I still dance a little bit. I take class. I have a gig coming up. And actually for this gig, it's a good example. We haven't made the piece yet. This is going to be a brand new evening length work. And I have no idea what it's going to look like until we get in the studio and start making it. So I can't predict what my body's going to go through. And it might go through some weird stuff. Like, we'll see. But with all the training I've done, part of the point of it is to build the resiliency so that my body can go through the weirdness, can go through the over repetition without breaking down, right? Because I've given it enough stimulus in the right way and in a more symmetrical way. I've built essentially a balance so that it can withstand a little more abuse, right? I wish choreography could be better for us physically, but it's just like, that's not the case. And frankly, it's not the point. I have to admit, if I'm let's say I'm going to New York City Ballet and watching a piece, I do in fact want to see you kick your leg up to your face as high as you can. That's the point of the show. I would like it to hurt you less though, and for your body to be able to withstand it. And that's where the training comes in, right? And another thing I found in my own personal experience, this was with my body and then other dancers I know who have fortunately started to train in smarter ways, and things that my clients who are athletes of other types have discovered. We're all athletes in a way, especially New Yorkers. Is it often doesn't take anything very complicated to create that resiliency. There are lots of great ways to train. Like I said, I'm really into kettlebells right now. So I'm really enjoying that explosive movement, getting that ballistic movement in. But ultimately, if you take a body through squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, carry, and load it um, in a way that is heavy to the individual that they can manage in a safe way, I mean, that goes miles for that body, builds a ton of resiliency, right? Squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, carry, these basic movement patterns that if you can teach them to the body, find the best version for that body and just load it up to a safe degree for them. And progressive overload, right? That's a whole other thing, right? Making sure that you are progressing them in a safe and strategic way over time builds an insane amount of resiliency. So whether it is, a ballet dancer who's got to get their leg up to their face on a regular basis, or one of my clients who's just trying to feel better when they play golf, another thing that's not exactly going to be an even, you're not going to switch to the other swing,
Right.
Builds an incredible amount of resiliency. So it's, again, a big deficit I see within the dance community is not understanding that training equals resiliency. And another thing that you touched on that is really resonates with me was this idea that your mother said, well, you'll get better if you just do it. Right? If you just repeat this thing a 1,000 times, it'll get better. Okay, yes, but right? Is it getting better at the detriment of something else? As I'm sure you would know probably a number or a stat for this better than I would, but the vast majority of dance injuries are overuse injuries.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trauma. I mean, yeah, like I had a rib injury once that was kind of a traumatic, like hit a weird position in some choreography, fell to the floor, yada yada. It was very dramatic. But most of the time it's like, God, my foot hurts a little bit. And 2 weeks later, my foot hurts more. And then a few weeks after that, I'm like, I can't point my foot. Oh, because it's broken. Cool. I have an avulsion fracture. Like most of our injuries are just overuse because
Mm-hmm.
we are repeating the same thing 1,000 tendus and 1,000 dégagés and the same kicks and the same leaps. And so again, if the conventional wisdom is, well, to get better at it, you just do more of it, like that doesn't track. Absolutely
Right.
doesn't track. And so then it kills me when I see a dancer go into the gym, which great, like we're off to a good start. You have discovered a dumbbell. I'm very happy for you. But then they end up essentially doing dance movements with more load. I'm thinking, no. Like, don't do more penchés to get better at your penché. Do some deadlifts to get a better penché, Strengthen that posterior chain. So again, going back to, it doesn't need to be complicated training to create that resiliency. And it also does need to be different than the dance movements. The body likes balance. It also likes variety. It does not like doing the same thing too often. That was the biggest thing for me when I really started on this journey was squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, carry, loaded up, safe, progressive overload. The penché gets a lot better.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And it hurts less.
100,000%. I remember that running and doing just like basic mat level strength training with like bands and just basic weights helped me so much more with my dance routines and becoming stronger and more agile and more just feeling like I was jumping higher and doing different things than I ever have, like years and years of training of just dancing, same routines over and over and over again in different combinations. The specific dance form that I do, which is Bharatanatyam, is very similar in some ways to ballet because our like staple position is first position plie, second position plie, third position, and grand plie basically are like our main positions that we like move in. And so, and there's a lot of jumping and there's also a lot of low groundwork too. So it hurts your knees like over time, like there's so much. And then that's actually like one of the stats is that of dancers overuse injuries, knee problems tend to be the number one in some dance forms like Western forms like ballet and modern. And that's because of just lack of strength in not just your knees, but your hips and your core and other things. And so sometimes people are like, dance instructors might be like, oh, you just have to stretch more and you have to be able to
Oh,
bend your
it's
knees
always
more.
the answer. Just
And
be more flexible.
and that's not it, right? Like we know that from like a biomechanical chain perspective, we know that where your foot lands and where your knee turns is related to how your hip was turned out or turned in, or where your hip was positioned and what kind of muscles around the hip were activated when you landed on the floor. So strengthening around the hip and the trunk are so important for knee injuries, but like I didn't know that. And I was just like, my knees were cracking when I was 16. I was like, I feel like I'm 60. What is going on? What
You
happened
should,
was
if
overuse.
you should go to a ballet class and get a recording for the pod of what it sounds like when a room full of 20 somethings does their first Grand Prix in a ballet class. It is terrifying.
Yes.
It is a symphony of cracking joints, which admittedly like, I'm a part of. My body is a symphony of sounds to this day when it moves. It is pretty wild. Bring up the flexibility and the stretch is something I'd really like to touch on, which is that overemphasis on range of motion and static range of motion, passive range of motion, right? This is something. So I was not born with what I would consider, or what we would call in the classical dance world, a dancer facility, meaning not a super flexible pelvis. My feet didn't point incredibly well, just like across the board. Like I got my dad's genetics, kind of just like a stuck dude, you know? And in college, I saw these women and also some of the men who just like leg to the face, the foot was like over pointed, spines like seaweed. And I'm like, how do I do that? How do I get that? And I'm seeing what they're doing, which is a lot of static and passive stretching, right? You're just like sitting in the split, or you're just hanging over your legs,
Or even
you
worse,
know?
sitting in an oversplit.
Oh, of course, yes. Put that leg up on a chair. Absolutely. Just yank that ligament, girl. Um, and so of course that's what I would try to do. And listen, I'm not gonna lie to you, like I got some range out of it. I did become more flexible. I could get my leg higher and my foot pointed a little bit better. My body also started to fall apart in college, so there's that. And then I really didn't gain what is my current range of motion and flexibility until I started loading my joints, actually. So something I really want to emphasize is, yes, range of motion for a dancer is incredibly important. Some dance forms more than others. I practice the style of dance that comes out of the Paul Taylor repertoire most often. That's kind of my community. And actually, particularly the men in that world, we all kind of joke like we love it because our leg doesn't have to go very high very often. Like it's just not part of the rep. But even still, like you need a flexible body, and other techniques emphasize that flexibility much more so. Classical ballet, of course, but things like Graham technique, Horton, I mean, they take a lot of range. The best way to get that range ultimately actually is with some loading or some kind of active mobility. And so my hips did not really open up, and my feet did not really open up. My spine did not open up until I started training at the Kane School in Pilates. So that added some resistance and some organization to that movement, gave me more of a training in an active range of motion, right? And then it really, I mean, my range skyrocketed when I put a barbell on my back, right? Now I should also say I did not like roll into the gym and just like do a back squat on day one. We built up to these things. But when I started loading these positions, my ankles, my knees, my hips, my everything really opened up. And that's a really key piece of information that has not made its way into the dance world yet, is the idea of loading being for more than just building stronger muscles. And then even more perversely, we're given this idea that stronger muscles equal tighter muscles, which is absolute BS.
Thank you.
If anything, like you really want to, I tell this to a lot of my clients who have like tight hamstrings. They're like, what's a good hamstring stretch? I'm like, the RDL that you just did is a good hamstring stretch. So I'm not going to have you touch your toe. We're going to maybe work some more RDLs or RDL variations into your programming. to loosen up your hamstrings, right? And I think where a lot of that stems from, right, this, again, going back to the lack of information and the information we do get as performing artists just being, frankly, backwards, is dancers have not yet been treated as athletes. Like, we all know it, and dancers love to brag about it. You know, we'll talk about how, well, we work just as hard as a football player does. Yeah, you do, but you don't work like they do. And that's a problem.
Yep.
So people in Sarah Curry's fiance is a trainer that works for the Nationals. And I love talking with him about the work that he does, right? Because that very much informs how I then approach some of my work as a dancer, actually, some of my cross training, right? Because same ideas. Yes, in practice, you're swinging bats and throwing balls, because in a game, you have to swing a bat and throw a ball, right? And run. But then you go to the weight room and you do your squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry, right? You don't just swing the bat all day long to make the swing bat better. So for reasons I don't officially know, but I think it's just because dancers have always been viewed as artists and not athletes, is that information never translated over.
Yep.
We never got the message that to get better at our air quotes sport, it does require this cross training, which looks different and feels different than the sport itself. That this other movement that doesn't look like or feel like your activity is still there to improve it. So whether the desired outcome is a higher développé or a higher jump, or don't even get me started on, I'm going to say men as a generalization, because oftentimes, particularly in classical dance forms, men are doing the lifting, but that's not always the case, right? Lifting in dance, the way to really improve that is not just by doing more of it, it's by incorporating these basic loaded movement patterns. I mean, when I was in college, and then the gigs I worked after often required a lot of lifting, a lot of heavy upper body work. I did this piece right out of college that I very fond memories of. And the set was like this, like if a jungle gym sort of on steroids, like, you know, gone wild, steel pipes and poles. And the choreography is weaving through these steel pipes. Basically, I'm doing like pull-ups for 90 minutes in this show, but like I didn't know how to actually do a pull-up. You know, so I'm probably like bicepping it out the whole time. I have no idea what my lat is, you know. And so like, what do I do to prep for that? I'm like, nothing really. I just go to the set early and like climb around the poles more. It didn't occur to me to like learn to do a pull-up like a real one, and train my lats and train my lower traps and do these simple basic movement patterns, so that when I do have to do weird things on these pipes, it functions better, you know. So looking at a classical ballet overhead press, which anyone who's seen a classical pas de deux has witnessed. You know, these dancers are not getting a dumbbell or a barbell or a kettlebell and just practicing a clean, strict shoulder press.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I messed up my shoulder in an audition at a company I guess I won't mention, but the latter part of the audition, if everyone wants to visualize the lift at the end of Dirty Dancing that Patrick Swayze does,
yes,
we basically did that lift like 90 times
oh,
over and over and
wow.
over again. And again, no one's taught me what shoulder mechanics are.
Nope.
No one's taught me how to do this. All I know is this body is running at me, and I better get her up there if I want this job. And just like totally blew my left shoulder out.
Well, I think part of it, Jesse, is also like, at least this is my personal experience. I was terrified of going to the gym as a young girl dancer. And so it took me to get to PT school in my first year to ask my friend and like colleague in PT school to show me how to use gym equipment. That was when I started my gym journey. And that's the first time that I would really work out at the gym and really use the machines and use the weights, use the kettlebells and everything. So I think like everything that you said today, Jesse, like it resonates so much. And I know that dancers listening out there can, you know, if you are a dancer, you've most likely gone through some overuse injury or some acute injury at some point in your career if you've been dancing for more than 5 years. So it's really important that you think outside the box, that you, even if you don't have the money to pay to come into like, you know, one-on-one training sessions, which if you do, please go do it.
Yeah,
Jesse, we're gonna drop your information on the show notes below and put Vertical
Yes,
Equilibrium's
please.
information so people can reach out to you. But even if you can't do that, at least see if you can grab a friend, and any friend who can take you to the gym and show you how to use basic equipment, or order some very light things like bands and other things that you can do for resistance and very light weights that you can get started at home on your own. It's as simple as that, actually. Just have somebody who knows what they're doing show you basic things: bicep curls, shoulder presses, squats. There are videos online that you can watch too. Obviously, I don't recommend going and just finding things on the internet. The best thing to do is to work with somebody. But if you can't do
TikTok is not the
anything,
best place for
no,
good workouts.
not at all. But it's so true. What you're saying is right, Jesse, that we need to get more education out there. So that's why we're doing this podcast. So Jesse, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all of the knowledge that you just spewed at us today. It was incredible to just hear you go off and talk about different examples and your own journey and others. So we'll drop your stuff on the show notes, but is there any kind of personal Instagram handle or something else that people can follow you on as well?
Yeah, I'm not super active on social media. I'm trying to get better though, although at this point you might see just as much whiskey content as fitness content. That's just another hobby of mine, but if you're looking for a good bourbon, follow me. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Jesse, Jesset Barnett, Barnett. So you can follow me there and reach out that way. Definitely come see me at Physical Equilibrium or any of the other amazing trainers we have here. Yeah, get in the gym. What you said was absolutely right. It doesn't take much. It can be simple. Focus on the basics, get a little resistance in your body, do what you can. Accessibility is really important. Pick something you can stick with and that you can be consistent with. It goes a long way to build that resiliency in your body.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jesse, for everything today.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me rant. That was very therapeutic.